It was a cold morning in Birmingham, Alabama. Not cold enough to snow, but cold enough to make your breath visible and your fingers sting. Outside the Children's Medical Center on 7th Avenue, people hurried in and out, wrapped in scarves, holding coffee cups, moving fast like they could outrun whatever brought them there. But one person wasn't moving. He sat on a flattened cardboard box near the revolving doors, sketching quietly in a worn-out notebook. His name was Ezekiel Carter. He was just 9 years old. His coat was too big. One of his boots was patched, with duct tape, and a red knit beanie drooped low over his ears. He didn't ask for help. He didn't beg. He just sat and watched. Most Saturdays, he was there. At first, hospital staff tried to shoo him away, but he never caused trouble. He smiled when spoken to, and when he wasn't drawing, he was observing. Always observing. Across the street, a dark silver Range Rover sat parked by a fire hydrant. The engine was on, but the man inside barely moved. That was Jonathan Reeves, a man in his late 40s, with a sharp jawline and gray at his temples. His tie was loosened, his collar wrinkled. He had money, you could tell by the car, but he looked like someone running on fumes. In the back seat was his 6-year-old daughter, Issa. Her brown curls were tucked behind one ear, and her legs were hidden beneath a pink blanket. Her eyes were open, but she didn't speak. She hadn't, not since the accident. Once, she climbed trees and raced her cousins. Now, she sat in silence, paralyzed from the waist down. Jonathan opened the door, gently picked her up, and began walking toward the hospital entrance. He didn't notice Zeke. Most people didn't, but Zeke noticed him. He saw how tightly the man held the little girl, like she might fall apart. He noticed the way her eyes avoided the building, focused on the sky instead. Just as they were about to pass, Zeke stood and said softly, "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." Jonathan stopped mid-step. He turned slowly and stared. "What did you just say?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. Zeke stepped forward, holding his notebook against his chest. "I said I can help her walk again." Jonathan's arms tightened around Asa. "That's not funny, kid," he said, his voice sharp. "I wasn't joking." Zeke replied, calmly, without flinching. There was no smile on his face, no hesitation in his voice, just quiet certainty, the kind that didn't sound like it belonged to a child. Jonathan glanced down at the taped-up boot, the oversized coat, the cracked glasses hanging from Zeke's shirt collar. He didn't say another word. He turned and walked into the hospital, but something about that voice, so calm, so certain, stayed with him. And no matter how much he tried, he couldn't shake it from his mind. Inside the hospital, Jonathan sat through hours of appointments. Therapists, neurologists, specialists, all saying the same things. Long process. No guarantees. Maybe one day. He nodded along, but their voices became a blur. What echoed in his mind was that boy's quiet certainty. "I can make your daughter walk again." Around 2 p.m., Jonathan stepped out of the hospital with Issa in his arms. The sky had cleared, but the cold still bit at his skin. As he walked toward the car, he spotted the boy again. Same cardboard seat, same notebook in hand. This time, he was staring directly at Jonathan, as if he knew he'd come back. Jonathan hesitated. He looked down at Issa. Her head rested on his shoulder, eyes closed. She was light, too light. He turned and walked over. "What's your name?" Jonathan asked sharply. The boy looked up. "Zeke," he said softly. Jonathan's jaw clenched. "Why would you say something like that earlier? You think this is funny?" Zeke shook his head. "No, sir. You don't even know her." Jonathan snapped. "You don't know what she's been through." Zeke held his ground. "I don't need to know her to help." Jonathan folded his arms. "You're what, 9? "Almost 10, Zeke replied. "You're a kid in duct tape boots." What could you possibly know about helping my daughter? Zeke looked down, fingers tracing the edges of his notebook. My mom was a physical therapist, he said quietly. She taught me things. She said the body remembers, even when it forgets for a while. Jonathan squinted at him, skeptical. So what? You watched her do some stretches, and now you think you're a doctor? Zeke's voice didn't rise. I watched her help. A man walk after 5 years in a chair. She didn't have machines, just her hands, patience, and faith. Jonathan looked away. A nurse passing by gave Zeke a small wave. A janitor nodded at him. They all seemed to know him. I'm not giving you money, Jonathan muttered. I didn't ask for money, Zeke replied. Then what do you want? Zeke stepped forward, steady. Just 1 hour. Let me show you. Jonathan looked at Isa. Her eyes had opened. She was watching both of them. He sighed, rubbing his face. I should walk away. I should call security. But he didn't. Fine, Jonathan said. Meet us at Harrington Park. Tomorrow. Noon. Don't be late. Zeke nodded once. I'll be there. Jonathan turned and walked away. But in the rearview mirror, he saw Zeke still standing there. Hands at his sides, unshaken. The next day, noon sharp, Harrington Park was nearly empty. Just a few rusted swings, a cracked basketball court, and a breeze that rustled the leaves like whispers. Zeke was already there, sitting on a bench under a big oak tree. His notebook was tucked away. At his feet, a small gym bag and a neatly folded towel dotted 1207. Jonathan's SUV pulled up. He didn't say anything at first. Just got Isa out of the back seat, placed her gently in her wheelchair, and wheeled her toward the boy. Zeke stood as they approached. Hi again, he said politely. Isa gave a shy wave. Hi. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. How do you know? Our name? You said it yesterday, Zeke replied. I remember things. Jonathan looked at the towel. So ... What now? Magic carpet ride? Zeke didn't take the bait. No, sir. Just the basics. From his bag, he pulled out a pair of socks, a tennis ball, a jar of cocoa butter, and a cloth-wrapped bundle of warm rice. Jonathan looked at the odd items. What is all that? My mom's tools, Zeke answered calmly. The rice is for heat loosens tight muscles. The ball is for pressure points. Zeke turned to Isa, his voice gentle. If it's okay, I'll work with your legs. Nothing hurts. If anything feels weird, just say stop. Isa looked up at her dad. He nodded. You can try, but be careful. Zeke knelt beside the chair. He unwrapped the blanket from her legs and laid the warm rice cloth across her thighs. Isa flinched slightly. Too hot? Zeke asked. She shook her head. Feels nice. He waited a moment. Then, slowly, he began to move her legs. No jerks, no pressure, just smooth rotations. Side to side, up, down. Jonathan watched closely, arms crossed, ready to intervene. You ever done this before? He asked. Zeke didn't look up. My mom took me to shelters after school. Helped people who couldn't afford therapy, veterans. She said everyone deserves to feel human again. And she taught you all this? She said the body doesn't always need fancy, Zeke murmured. Just attention. He tapped lightly on Isa's knee. You feel that? Isa looked down. No, that's okay, Zeke said calmly. I'll keep asking. He kept talking to her while working, asking about her favorite food, her favorite cartoon. At first, her answers were short. But slowly, she started asking him things too. Do you live around here? Kind of. Do you go to school? I used to. Why not? Zeke paused. My mom got sick. Then she passed. I've been figuring things out since. Isa's voice softened. I'm sorry. Zeke gave her a faint smile. Thanks. Jonathan's. Posture eased slightly, but he said nothing. After 30 minutes, Zeke tapped her ankle again. "You feel that?" Issa blinked. "A little like pressure." Zeke looked up. "That's good." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "She says that sometimes during her therapy sessions." "Yeah," Zeke nodded. "But those sessions happen in rooms full of machines. Machines can be scary. Kids freeze up. Here," he gestured to the open park. "There's air. Space. Feels different." Jonathan said nothing, but he was definitely listening now. Zeke guided Issa through more motions, wiggling toes. "Small stretches. I'll show you more next week," he said, standing up. "Takes time. But your muscles, they still remember how to work. You just have to remind them." Issa smiled. "Bigger this time." "Okay." Jonathan cleared his throat. "We're not promising anything." "I'm not either." Zeke replied. "I'm just trying." Jonathan looked at him for a long moment, then pulled a folded bill from his coat pocket and held it out. Zeke stepped back. "No, sir. I don't want your money." Jonathan looked confused. "Then why are you doing this?" Zeke shrugged. "Because your daughter smiled." Jonathan looked down at Issa. She was still smiling, but he didn't understand yet how a kid with nothing could give so much to someone he barely knew. The following Sunday was warmer, but Zeke still wore the same oversized jacket. Not because he needed it, but because it made him feel close to his mom. She used to call it his helper's coat. Said every good healer needed something that reminded them why they care. He arrived at Harrington Park at 11:45. The towel was laid out. Supplies lined up. A bottle of water beside the bench. Some kids played basketball nearby. A dog barked in the distance. At exactly noon, Jonathan's SUV rolled up. Issa was already smiling before the car even stopped. Zeke waved. "Hi, Issa." "Hi," she chirped, curls bouncing as Jonathan lifted her into the chair. Jonathan looked tired again, but it was different this time. Like the weight he carried wasn't crushing him. He gave Zeke a small nod. No words. But it meant something. They got into the routine. Heat packs. Stretches. Toe flexes. Today, Jonathan joined in. He sat cross-legged on the grass, doing each motion as Zeke explained. He even messed up once. "You're bending the wrong way," Zeke teased with a grin. Jonathan gave him a side eye. "I haven't stretched since college." They laughed. Even Issa. About 20 minutes in, Zeke leaned forward. "All right, Issa, let's try something different." He unfolded a belt from his bag and placed it under her knees, showing Jonathan how to hold each end. "She's going to try to lift both knees now," he said. "Just a little. We'll help balance. But she controls the movement." Jonathan blinked. "You sure?" Zeke nodded. "She's ready." They gave her a few seconds. Issa's brow furrowed. She focused, grunted softly. Then, her knees lifted slightly. Barely an inch, but they lifted. Jonathan stared. "You did that?" Issa smiled. "I did it." Jonathan swallowed hard. "You really did it?" Zeke nodded slowly, watching the belt. "See? The body remembers. You just have to be patient enough to let it talk." Jonathan looked at him. "You're something else, kid." Zeke didn't respond, just returned to the stretch. After the session, they began packing up. Jonathan crouched beside him. "Where do you go after this?" Zeke shrugged. "Around." Jonathan lowered his voice. "You got a place to sleep?" Zeke hesitated. "Sometimes." Jonathan exhaled, rubbed his neck. "You ever think about staying with us for a while?" Zeke blinked. "You serious? I've got a guest room." "You wouldn't be in the way." Zeke looked down. "You sure your neighbors won't mind a kid like me?" Jonathan gave a short laugh. "Man, after what you've done for my daughter, they better not say a word." Zeke didn't answer right away, but Jonathan could see the wheels turning. The next morning, Zeke stood outside Jonathan's house, backpack slung over one shoulder, rolled up blanket under his arm. Jonathan opened the door in sweatpants and a coffee mug in hand. Right on time, he said. Isa ran to the hallway. Zeke, he smiled. Hey, superstar. Jonathan stepped aside. Welcome home. By the fifth Sunday, Harrington Park was no longer just a quiet corner of the neighborhood. It had become something else. Word had spread. First, it was a nurse who happened to pass by and saw Isa moving her knees. Then, a therapist mentioned it to a colleague. Soon, families who had tried everything began showing up, hoping for anything that might work. That morning, when Zeke arrived with his usual gym bag, 5 families were already waiting by the big oak tree. Some had brought kids in wheelchairs, others with walkers. Parents clutched coffee cups and looked around nervously, not sure what to expect. Zeke looked at Jonathan, who gave him a nod of support. Without hesitation, Zeke approached the families, greeted each child by name, and asked the parents about their routines. He didn't promise anything. He just listened. Then, he began doing what he always did: warm packs, soft encouragement, patient guidance. Isa waited quietly on the bench, watching him help others. Not once did she complain. When Jonathan asked her if she was okay, she simply said, "I like seeing him help." Zeke showed one parent how to stretch their son's legs using a towel. He showed another how to use tennis balls for nerve stimulation. It's not about fixing, he said. It's about reminding the body what it used to know. One little girl, recovering from a stroke, cried when her leg twitched unexpectedly. Her mother cried too. Zeke didn't react with surprise. He just smiled and said, "See? It remembers." By the end of the session, some of the kids were moving slightly. Others just smiled for the first time in weeks. No one left the park quickly. They stayed, talked, exchanged numbers, asked if they could come back. And Zeke, with his duct-taped boots and oversized coat, stood in the middle of it all, not as a leader, but as a reason to believe again. It was the 9th Sunday when something shifted. From the moment they left the house, Jonathan could feel it. The air felt warmer, the sky clearer. Even Isa seemed different, quiet, focused, like she was getting ready for something big. When they arrived at Harrington Park, the bench under the big oak tree was already surrounded. Not with chaos, but with quiet hope. Families were setting up chairs. Kids were chatting softly. Therapists were stretching little arms and legs. Zeke didn't say anything. He just laid out the towel, unpacked his bag, and looked at Isa. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. Not with excitement, but with determination. Jonathan wheeled her to the center of the mat. Zeke helped guide her legs gently into place. Jonathan moved behind her and placed his hands under her arms. "Same as always," Zeke whispered. "We help you stand. You do the rest." They counted. Together. 1, 2, 3. Jonathan lifted. Zeke steadied her knees, and Isa stood. Her legs shook. Her arms trembled, but she was standing. On her own. The park went silent. A little boy dropped his toy. A mother gasped. Isa opened her eyes and whispered, "I'm standing." Zeke blinked fast, fighting back emotion. "Yeah," he said. "You." Jonathan couldn't move, couldn't speak. He slowly stepped back. She stayed up. She took one step. Then another. Then, because she was 6 and didn't know how to be afraid, she took a third. She stumbled into Jonathan's arms, and he caught her, laughing and crying at the same time. "You did it," he whispered. "You really did it." Isa turned too. "Zeke, you said I would." Zeke smiled gently. "I said we'd try." And in that moment, no one cared about titles or qualifications or miracles. They just saw a girl who stood. a boy who showed up, and a park filled with proof that sometimes belief is enough. The sun was low in the sky when Zeke walked alone through Harrington Park. His shoes still had duct tape. His coat still hung a little too big. But his steps, those were sure now. A nurse from the Children's Medical Center recognized him, whispered to a friend. That friend told another. Soon, families were gathering every Sunday not because of flyers or fame, but because a child gave them reason to believe again. One Sunday, a girl in a pink hoodie whispered, "I took a step." Her mother cried softly beside her. A boy who hadn't moved his fingers in months smiled when Zeke placed a warm cloth over his hand. They called it therapy, but to them, it felt like hope. Zeke never asked for anything. Not praise, not money, not attention. He only showed up, rolled out his towel, and gave all he had. Jonathan once asked him, "Why do you keep doing this, even now?" Zeke didn't look up from his notebook. He said quietly, "Because I know what it's like to feel invisible." And now, none of them were. Inside the Reeves home, laughter echoed. Issa was walking slow, careful steps, but she was walking. Her legs remembered. Her heart remembered too. One evening, as Zeke stood at the window, watching fireflies blink in the dark, Jonathan placed a hand on his shoulder. "You saved my daughter," he said. Zeke gave a tiny nod. Jonathan added, "And maybe ... you saved me too." Zeke whispered, "We saved each other." And sometimes, that's all it takes.